Picture this. It's Father's Day morning 2017. A 4-year-old girl sits on her mother's bed, watching her get dressed for a family celebration. In the next room, her teenage brother plays video games with his headphones on. It's supposed to be a day of joy, of family gatherings, of honoring fathers across America. But in less than an hour, that little girl will watch her mother die in front of her eyes, shot 10 times by a man who claimed he loved her. And those 10 gunshots will shatter not just one family, but reveal a terrifying pattern of domestic violence that could have been stopped. This is the story of Latrice Morris Dorsey and the warning signs that everyone missed. But before we dive into this heartbreaking case, I need you to do something that could literally save a life. Hit that subscribe button right now. Every single view, every share, every comment helps spread awareness about domestic violence. Your engagement matters more than you know. Latrice Morris Dorsey was everything you'd want in a neighbor, a friend, a mother. At 42, she was a dedicated physical therapist who spent her days helping patients regain their strength and mobility. Her colleagues remember her infectious smile and genuine concern for everyone under her care. But it was her role as a mother that truly defined her. She had 3 children, and they were her world. Her 14-year-old son, Justin, was a straight-A student with dreams of playing football in college. Her 4-year-old daughter, Jada, was the light of her life, full of curiosity and joy. Latrice had recently moved to a modest yellow house on Detroit's west side, hoping for a fresh start after ending a 4-year relationship with Maxwell. The move represented more than just a change of address. It was Latrice's declaration of independence, her attempt to build a new life free from the toxicity that had slowly crept into her relationship with Maxwell. She changed her phone number, established new routines, and began planning for a future that didn't include the man who had become increasingly possessive and controlling. But Maxwell had other plans. What Latrice didn't know was that her attempts to establish boundaries had only enraged Maxwell further. Unable to reach her directly, he began calling her estranged husband, Paul Dorsey, with increasingly disturbing messages. Paul later testified that Maxwell called him at least 20 times in the weeks leading up to the murder.
What did I just say? I said, first time I said, he called back, he said he killed her. He called back 5 minutes later, told me he wasn't going to kill her. But that's what he said. He said twice he was going to kill her.
Okay, but
"When I see your wife, I'm going to kill her," Maxwell told Paul during one of these calls. It wasn't said in anger or as an empty threat. Paul would later describe Maxwell's voice as eerily calm, calculating, certain. These weren't the words of a man overcome by emotion. They were the words of someone making a promise. Paul faithfully relayed each threat to Latrice, warning her about Maxwell's escalating behavior. But like so many domestic violence victims, Latrice found herself trapped in an impossible situation. She had taken every precaution she could think of: new phone number, new address, varied routines. Yet Maxwell's obsession only seemed to grow stronger. The pattern that emerged in those final weeks is one that domestic violence experts recognize as extremely dangerous. Maxwell's behavior followed a deadly progression that too often ends in tragedy. First came the inability to accept the breakup, then the surveillance and monitoring, the explicit threats, the boundary violations, each step building toward the ultimate act of control, taking her life. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is how preventable it was. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were blazing red flags that should have triggered immediate intervention. Yet somehow, the system failed to protect Latrice and her children. Father's Day, June 18, 2017, dawned bright and warm in Detroit. Across the city, families were preparing for barbecues and celebrations. In the Morris Dorsey household, there was an air of excitement. Latrice was getting ready to visit her sister's house for the holiday. 4-year-old Jada sat on her mother's bed, watching with the fascination that only small children possess as their parents prepare for the day. In his room, Justin had his headphones on, absorbed in a video game. The sounds of the house, his mother moving around, little Jada's chatter, faded into background noise. It was a perfectly ordinary Sunday morning in what Latrice hoped would be their new normal. But Earl Maxwell had been planning something far different. That morning, Maxwell made several calls to mutual friends, asking about Latrice's whereabouts with an intensity that concerned those who spoke with him. One friend later told police that Maxwell seemed unusually calm during their conversation, a marked change from his previous agitated state. This eerie composure would prove to be another warning sign that experts recognize as particularly dangerous. Around noon, Maxwell called Paul Dorsey one final time. Unlike his previous calls filled with explicit threats, this conversation was brief and cryptic. "It ends today," Maxwell said before hanging up. Paul immediately tried to call Latrice to warn her, but couldn't reach her, a fact that would haunt him for years to come. Maxwell then drove to Latrice's new address, information he had obtained through persistent questioning of people in their social circle. Neighbors later reported seeing his vehicle circle the block multiple times before parking several houses away. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spontaneous act of violence. This was surveillance, planning, premeditation. At approximately 2:45 p.m., security cameras from a nearby home captured Maxwell approaching Latrice's front door. He carried nothing that would raise alarm, no visible weapon, no suspicious packages. This calculated normalcy allowed him to reach the door without drawing attention from neighbors who might have intervened. What happened next would forever change the lives of two innocent children and destroy a family's sense of safety and trust in the world. Whether Latrice opened the door willingly or Maxwell forced his way in remains unclear from the evidence. What we know for certain is that he entered the house with deadly intent, carrying a concealed handgun and nursing a rage that had been building for weeks. Inside, 4-year-old Jada was coloring at the kitchen table while her mother prepared a late lunch. The first sign of trouble came when voices were raised, Maxwell confronting Latrice with accusations about a new relationship, his jealousy and possessiveness finally boiling over into violence. Latrice, showing the protective instincts that defined her as a mother, positioned herself between Maxwell and her daughter. She tried to reason with him to de-escalate the situation while subtly motioning for Jada to move toward the hallway. It was her final act of parenting, trying to shield her baby from the horror that was about to unfold. Maxwell pulled out his gun and fired the first shot into Latrice's torso. As she collapsed to the floor, mortally wounded, he didn't stop. He fired 9 more times, continuing to shoot even after she had fallen. The medical examiner would later testify that the pattern of wounds indicated Maxwell had moved around Latrice's body, firing from different angles with deliberate precision. 10 shots, 10 deliberate acts of violence committed in front of a terrified 4-year-old child. Jada, frozen in terror, witnessed every moment of her mother's murder from just feet away. The trauma of that day would require years of therapy and leave psychological scars that may never fully heal. In his bedroom, Justin's headphones initially muffled the sounds of the argument, but 10 gunshots in rapid succession finally penetrated his audio barrier. He ripped off his headphones and ran toward the commotion, arriving to find his mother bleeding on the kitchen floor. Maxwell already fled through the back door. What Justin found in that kitchen would have broken most adults, but this remarkable young man somehow found the strength to act. He immediately called 911 while trying to comfort both his dying mother and his traumatized little sister. His composure in those crucial moments likely saved Jada from even greater psychological trauma. Medical records indicate that Latrice was still breathing when Justin reached her, allowing for a brief final exchange between mother and son. Justin has never revealed what his mother said in those final moments, describing them only as her last gift to me. The fact that he has kept these words private speaks to the profound love and respect he had for his mother, even in her final moments. First responders arrived within minutes of Justin's call, but there was nothing they could do. Latrice Morris Dorsey was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving behind 3 children and a devastated family. The children, still in blood-stained clothing, were quickly separated and attended to by crisis intervention specialists. While Justin demonstrated remarkable resilience, 4-year-old Jada entered an almost catatonic state. Pediatric trauma specialists noted she exhibited classic signs of acute stress response: minimal verbal communication, fixed staring, and physical rigidity. When she did speak, she repeatedly asked when her mother would wake up, a heartbreaking misunderstanding of death that's common in young children who witness extreme violence. Maxwell had fled the scene immediately after the shooting, but his freedom wouldn't last long. Detroit police launched an immediate manhunt, and his name and photograph were circulated across law enforcement channels throughout Michigan. Within 48 hours, the pressure from the extensive search led Maxwell to surrender at Detroit's 6th Precinct, accompanied by a pastor from his childhood church. During his initial questioning, Maxwell offered a version of events that defied logic and contradicted all physical evidence. He claimed he had gone to Latrice's home only to retrieve personal belongings, bringing the gun for self-protection. According to Maxwell, an argument escalated when he discovered evidence of Latrice's new relationship, and the gun accidentally discharged during a struggle. When detectives pointed out that 10 gunshots indicated deliberate action rather than accident, Maxwell requested an attorney. But his initial statement had already provided investigators with critical admissions. He acknowledged his presence at the scene, ownership of the murder weapon, and jealousy as a motivating factor. Maxwell's trial began in April 2018 in Wayne County Circuit Court, where prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder and felony firearm possession. The case they presented was methodical and devastating, emphasizing the premeditation and deliberate intent that distinguish this from a crime of passion. Paul Dorsey's testimony proved particularly damaging to Maxwell's claims of accident. Paul detailed Maxwell's numerous threats and that final ominous call on the morning of the murder. Cell phone records corroborated this testimony, showing 23 calls from Maxwell to Paul in the 2 weeks preceding Latrice's death. The prosecution also presented text messages Maxwell had sent to friends expressing his inability to let her move on with someone else. The forensic evidence further demolished Maxwell's defense. Ballistics experts testified that the 10 shots were fired from various positions around Latrice's fallen body, completely contradicting claims of accident or struggle. The medical examiner's testimony was particularly damning, detailing how the pattern of wounds indicated Maxwell had continued shooting even after Latrice had collapsed to the floor. Perhaps most impactful was 14-year-old Justin's testimony. Speaking with remarkable composure for someone so young, he recounted hearing the argument escalate, the gunshots that followed, and finding his mother dying on the kitchen floor. His description of Maxwell's demeanor, cold, determined, methodical, directly contradicted the defense's portrayal of a man overcome by emotion. As the evidence mounted against him, Maxwell's defense strategy shifted from claiming accident to seeking a reduced charge of second-degree murder based on extreme emotional disturbance. This change represented a tacit admission that the accidental discharge narrative had completely collapsed under scrutiny. The sentencing hearing brought raw emotion to the Wayne County courtroom, as family members finally had their chance to address the man who had destroyed their lives. But what happened next would shock everyone present and reveal the true nature of Earl Maxwell's character. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Maxwell began by claiming that he and Latrice were supposed to be dating and were still dating until this plumber guy came along. The audacity of this statement, essentially blaming Latrice for her own murder, left the courtroom stunned. Here was a man who had just been convicted of brutally killing a woman in front of her child, and he was still trying to justify his actions. Maxwell continued with what can only be described as a delusional monologue, claiming to love the woman he had murdered while simultaneously suggesting she deserved her fate for moving on with her life. The judge repeatedly told him to stop, but Maxwell persisted in his victim-blaming narrative. Only when directly confronted by the judge did Maxwell finally acknowledge wrongdoing. I was wrong, and I'm sorry," he said. "Ain't no way I can repay this. This is between me and the Lord now." He claimed to have repented with every bone in my body and spoke of a dream where God showed him that Latrice was with the Lord, a claim that many interpreted as yet another manipulation tactic. But the most powerful moments came when Latrice's children addressed their mother's killer. Justin, now 18 and preparing for college, spoke with dignity and strength that belied his years. "My mom was the nicest person, the most caring person," he said, and for you to take her out of my life like that hurts my heart so much." The impact statement from Latrice's stepdaughter was equally powerful. She expressed her hatred for Maxwell and her desire for him to feel her pain, emotions that were entirely justified given the trauma he had inflicted on their family. In June 2018, Maxwell was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison after pleading guilty to murder. While justice was served, it could never truly compensate for the lives destroyed by his actions. What happened to Justin and Jada in the aftermath of their mother's murder is both heartbreaking and inspiring. 4-year-old Jada, who witnessed her mother's brutal murder, required intensive therapy to process the trauma. Child psychologists worked with her for years, helping her understand that what happened wasn't her fault and that she was safe. The specialists noted that childhood trauma of this magnitude often manifests in complex, long-term psychological effects, including post-traumatic stress disorder, attachment issues, and fundamental alterations to brain development during critical formative years. Jada's recovery would be a long journey, but her family's love and professional support helped her begin to heal. Justin's response to the tragedy was nothing short of remarkable. Despite witnessing his mother's murder and having to comfort his dying mother while protecting his traumatized sister, he channeled his grief into determination. In the months following the tragedy, he became fiercely protective of Jada, often sleeping near her door and checking on her throughout the night. His academic performance, rather than suffering, actually improved. Justin graduated high school with a perfect 4.0 GPA and earned a full football scholarship to Ferris State University. Even more meaningfully, he chose to major in physical therapy, the same profession his mother had dedicated her life to. This decision represented more than career choice. It was a way of honoring his mother's legacy and continuing her work of helping others heal. The resilience shown by both children stands as a testament to the foundation of love and strength that Latrice had provided them. Even in death, her influence continued to guide and protect them. Latrice's tragic story illuminates warning signs that often precede lethal domestic violence, signs that are crucial for everyone to recognize. Maxwell's behavior followed a documented pattern that domestic violence experts call the escalation to lethality. The first red flag was possessiveness and jealousy. Maxwell's obsessive monitoring of Latrice's activities, his accusations about new relationships, and his belief that he owned her rather than loved her, these represent critical warning signs. When a partner begins to view you as property rather than an autonomous person, danger often follows. Escalation patterns demand immediate attention. Maxwell's progression from verbal arguments to explicit threats to homicide followed a path that experts recognize as extremely dangerous. This escalation often accelerates after separation, as abusers lose direct control over their partners and resort to increasingly desperate measures. Specific threats, especially when communicated to third parties like Paul Dorsey, require immediate intervention. Research consistently shows that explicit threats to kill should always be taken seriously, particularly when combined with access to weapons and a history of controlling behavior. Boundary violations constitute another crucial warning sign. Maxwell's persistent contact, despite Latrice's clear desire to end communication, demonstrated a fundamental disrespect for her autonomy, a mindset that enables violence when other control tactics fail. Effective safety planning begins with documentation. Unlike Latrice, who relied primarily on informal protection, potential victims should create paper trails through police reports, documented threats, and formal restraining orders. These records establish patterns of behavior that help authorities assess risk and intervene appropriately. Comprehensive safety plans include multiple layers of protection. Change phone numbers and block abusers on all platforms, but also inform employers, children's schools, and neighbors about potential threats. Vary daily routines, travel routes, and schedules to become less predictable. Consider technological security measures. Check devices for tracking apps, change passwords on all accounts, and disable location services on social media. Home security systems with remote monitoring provide additional protection and evidence collection. Most importantly, connect with professional support services. Domestic violence advocates can help develop personalized safety strategies based on risk assessment tools that evaluate lethality factors. These professionals understand the complex dynamics of abusive relationships and offer guidance beyond what friends and family, however well-intentioned, can provide. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, operates 24 hours daily, providing crisis intervention, safety planning, and referrals to local resources. Their website offers chat options for those unable to speak safely. Local domestic violence shelters provide emergency housing, legal advocacy, and counseling services. Many operate without requiring identification or insurance, removing barriers to access. Legal aid organizations in most communities offer free representation for protective orders and custody issues arising from domestic violence situations. Latrice Morris Dorsey's life was cut short by a man who confused possession with love, control with devotion. Her story serves as a stark reminder that domestic violence can affect anyone, regardless of education, profession, or social status. But it also demonstrates the incredible resilience of the human spirit, embodied in her children who have transformed their trauma into strength and purpose. If this story has impacted you, please take action now. Hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might benefit from recognizing these warning signs.